Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking time out to join this third in the series of webinars CPR has been hosting. So, in this series of roundtables, we have been discussing about various pathways to India's energy transition. And as you know, the first two focused on distributed energy resources. In the first session, we focused in April 13th. On April 27th, we discussed about solar feeders. And in this third session, we are going to discuss on innovations, technologies, and reforms required for a viable utilities. And today we have the Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation to discuss certain ideas, and we have a stellar panel to discuss it. And without much ado, I'll hand it over to Dr. Anshu Bharadwaj. He will kickstart the session and introduce the panelists. Over to you, Dr. Bharadwaj.
Thank you, Ashwini. Thank you. And I compliment you and CPR team for organizing this webinar and continuing this series. I think it's important to keep this dialogue going despite the pandemic and the difficult times, just because it's a very important topic. So as Ashwini said, this particular session talk is focused on distribution utilities. And I think it's a very important subject because distribution utilities is at the core or central to the adoption of clean energy policies and technologies and move towards decarbonization path. As my colleague from Shakti, Manu, likes to say, he uses the 3 Ds for the distribution company's transition. One refers to decarbonization, one refers to decentralization, and third refers to digitalization. And I think I agree with what he says, because all 3 are currently sort of forces which are on the DISCOMs. Just to give examples, in the decarbonization and decentralization, we have the solar rooftop photovoltaic, which are gradually getting momentum. Although still economics is still not what we expect it should be, but still with the declining costs of panels, we hope solar RTPV gets traction in the coming time. Electric vehicles in many cities are being deployed, especially in the public transportation. For example, Bangalore already has announced plans to procure buses for the BMTC network. And that is a second driver on DISCOMs because it adds to obviously the electrical load of where the charging infrastructure is located. And of course, the adoption of energy efficient appliances, which is a continuous effort through energy efficient air conditioners and lighting and other appliances. That's the third driver on DISCOMs. So what I'm trying to say is that DISCOMs are passing through a very crucial transition, and how we shape up the DISCOMs through this will in many ways impact the adoption of our clean energy policy plans and targets. Shakti has been hosting a distribution utilities platform for the last 2.5 years, which is being chaired by Mr. Girish Pradhan. And this is an effort to bring together a large number of utilities and DISCOMs to share their experiences, their best practices, common lessons learned. Basically, a platform where DISCOMs can talk openly and freely and discuss their issues and challenges. And I think it's done a very nice job to bring various voices together. We are keeping the momentum going under DUF, and we'll be holding a session shortly. So with these opening comments, I'll stop. We have a very learned panel of speakers who have kindly agreed to join today. And let me quickly introduce them to you so that, and then we can get on with the presentation by Akanksha. So we have Mr. Kumar Nayak, the Additional Chief Secretary, Energy in Government of Karnataka. He is someone who has been in the energy sector for a long time. He was the MD of Karnataka Power Transmission Corporation Limited and also MD of BESCOM, so who has seen all sides of energy story in transmission and distribution, and also my respected senior from Karnataka cadre. So welcome to you, sir, and thank you for joining us despite these challenging situations.
Thank you very much, Anshu. Thank you so much.
We have Mr. Jayant Kavle, a very senior and distinguished person who has been in power sector in both government and corporate sectors for decades. He was chairman of Maharashtra State Electricity Board, MSEB. Notably, he was the one who presided over trifurcation of MSEB when the Electricity Act was implemented. And so he knows the entire story of the shifting to generation, transmission, and distribution from a bundled utility. He also, in his capacity as JS in MOP, was involved closely in the RAP-DRP, which was a very important instrument in the distribution sector. And then he worked in the corporate sector with Jindal Power, Ratan India Power, and other industries. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining, and welcome to you for this today's webinar. We have Ganesh Srinivasan, CEO of Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited. And he combines almost 2 decades of experience in various sectors, including utilities, infrastructure, automotive, product development, etc. He also was chief of transmission and distribution in Tata Power, and also was the head of the strategy in Tata Power based out of Mumbai. Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you so much for joining today's.
Thank you, Anshu.
We look forward to hearing you. Mr. Anil Rawal is the MD and CEO of IntelliSmart. He is a former civil servant, having spent almost 23 years in both government and corporate sectors. He's someone who specializes in especially in the PPPs, the public-private partnerships, and has examined the financial, contractual, the regulatory aspects of large infrastructure projects, closely involved in the evolution of PPP framework for large infra projects. Welcome to you, Mr. Anil Rawal. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Mr. Anshu. Thank you.
Mahua Acharya is the, Mahua, welcome. She is the MD and CEO of Cesl, the Convergence Energy Services Limited. And she is building up the organization to a very important player in our clean energy system. She has long-standing experience in areas like green finance, RE, carbon markets. Notably, she was the assistant DG in Global Green Growth Institute based out of Seoul, where she was responsible for expanding GGGI's operations in 16 countries at a very crucial stage. She also was the MD of Sequest Capital, and in that position, she helped pioneer the design and deployment of carbon markets. Thank you, Mahua. Thank you for joining today, and welcome to today's webinar. Finally, we have Dr. Martin Lux, who's head of energy at KFW India, based out of New Delhi. Dr. Lux has 25 years of experience in developmental cooperation, scientific research, forest management, and he has served in various continents in Asia, Africa, Germany, Latin America. Someone who specializes in climate change, climate finance, and energy transition. Dr. Lux, thank you so much, and welcome to our webinar today. And finally, my colleague Manu from Shakti, he leads our clean power program, and will be coordinating the webinar going forward. Manu has, before joining Shakti, worked in GIZ, and in that capacity, he worked very closely with Bureau of Energy Efficiency and also EESL. He is someone who was closely involved in the government's flagship programs in lighting, smart meters, and electric vehicles. So with that, I'll stop and welcome to all our distinguished panelists. We look forward to hearing your views. Thank you so much for taking your time and joining us in these difficult and challenging situations. I'll request Akanksha to give a short overview of today's topic and then take forward the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anshu. for opening the webinar. I'll share my screen and proceed with the presentation. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it's visible.
To set the context for today's webinar, in this presentation, we are summarizing the set of opportunities that we see playing critical role in making the utilities technically and financially agile. We are also discussing a set of obstacles that are currently prevalent in the sector and requires urgent action. Moving on to the next slide. Energy sector in India currently is at a very interesting inflection point. We are seeing that supply has exceeded the demand. New energy, new consumer segments such as electric vehicles are coming into space, as well as more and more RE is coming into picture. From utilities perspective, if I talk and if I map the present and the future scenario, say the year 2030, which also coincides with the NDC target for India, target year for India, we are essentially aiming to reduce our AT&C losses by almost by half, making it comparable with the global averages. We are trying to eliminate the ARR ACS gap that is prevalent in the sector, which results into a lot of financial distress for the DISCOM, currently averaging to about 0.5 rupees per unit of the electricity that is sold. At the same time, we are also aiming to transit from fossil fuel dominated power mix to a cleaner power mix. Right. So essentially, this requires a high level approach that envelopes the innovation, technology, and reforms that would interplay with each other and also would address the legacy issues of the sector and would ensure that affordable, reliable, and quality power is available to all. At present, if I see, there are various transitions that are happening in the sector with respect to innovations, technology, and finance that essentially revolves around the distribution sector reforms. For instance, we see that innovations are happening with respect to regulatory mechanisms and to ensure that DISCOMs become financially viable. If I take an example, in Jaipur, JVVNL implemented an incentive mechanism in one of the highest loss reporting subdivision, where employees were made accountable for the performance of the subdivision, and the capacities were built for them to address the ground level situation. As a result, the division, yeah.
Akanksha, can you please remove this red box, the turn on things, give subtitles a try? Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I did not notice that. Apologies. Resuming to the Rajasthan example, the initiative not only resulted into reduction of overall AT&C losses, but the subdivision also reported increased revenue in a short span of about 4 months. If I talk about technology, the decreasing cost and the procurement mechanisms that are coming into play are facilitating adoption of technology. Talking about specifically in BESCOM's head office, we have seen that RE has been integrated with EV charging infrastructure to reduce the overall emissions emerging from the EV vehicle segment. The DISCOM also undertook the architecture mapping that was required for such a transition, and is also looking into scaling it up further going forward. If I talk about finance and taking specific example of how distributed renewable energy segment has suffered, or I would say has stayed at the back seat because of lack of standardized approaches to evaluate the enterprises, to evaluate the business models, and which has sort of created apprehension within the financing community to come forward and finance these interventions. To address this situation, standardized monitoring and evaluation tools have been developed, that facilitates the evaluation from financing perspective, and is also facilitating DRE enterprises to see and monitor how they are progressing in the sector going forward. Moving on to this, in this particular slide, we have essentially identified critical challenges that are grappling the distribution sector, and what sort of innovations in terms of reforms, finance and technology can address these obstacles and essentially convert them into opportunities for the distribution sector. The COVID-19 situation aggravated the financial distress for the discoms, and we are currently staring at a cumulative debt of about 6 trillion rupees at an all India level from the state-owned discoms. In addition, the distribution infrastructure is overburdened and it results into high AT&C losses, as well as it creates problem for renewable energy to integrate with the current grid. From there, we move on to how the technology adoption rate has been comparatively slow, primarily because a lot of capital is already tied up with the older technology, and they need to run their course of life in order to recover the investments and the required rate of returns. Further on the demand side, if I talk about from the consumer's perspective, we see quality and reliability of the power has been a major challenge. To just give an example of how reforms, finance and technology can address these challenges, I'll focus on the financial stress of the discoms. When it comes to technology, the AT&C loss levels for the discoms can be reduced if they leverage the digital technologies. For instance, smart meters can help eliminate or reduce the metering billing inefficiencies within the sector, or the demand side management can help optimize the power procurement strategies for the discoms. We also see that largely the traditional financing mechanisms are available for the discoms, whereas innovation is required in terms of finance, whereas off-balance sheet financing tools can be deployed for discoms so that more and more capital comes into the sector. When I talk about reforms, essentially there is a need to undertake tariff reforms, rationalize the tariff, and also map the actual costs that discoms are incurring right now to supply power, so that complementing strategies can be developed. To close this presentation, I would just sum it up that there are critical tenets around reforms, around innovation, as well as finance that are necessary to bring the eco-level changes and to propel the distribution sector reforms so that losses are reduced and systemic issues within the sector can be addressed. With this, I'll now request Manu to please take over. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Akanksha. Thank you for covering the entire opportunity landscape on the area of utilities. I now sort of proceed and take over where Anshu mentioned in terms of our esteemed panel. I would like to now sort of shift gears and draw upon the experience which our panelists are sitting on, so as to now and try and understand how do we sort of shape the narrative going forward. I think as you might have noticed from Akanksha's talk, which spoke largely about the need to sort of move towards innovation in the policy and regulatory space, look into newer technologies like renewable energies and storage, and also see how we can sort of dovetail new aspects of financing so that we can try and sort of finance these new advancements. I think at the back end, one thing is a given that the way we see it, the coal-based or the fossil-intensive power sector, the kind of costs we have enjoyed over the last few decades, we are not going to see the same kind of cost structure, at least for the fossil fuel regime-based generation going forward. Renewables are here. and they are likely to sort of even play a more increasing role. And this is where I would say the challenge for our distribution companies emerge, because they are the ones who have to sign those long-term power purchase agreements. So would they like to, would they not like to? I think that's the open question we have been grappling with over the last, I would say, at least a couple of years. And in today's panel, I think we have a very interesting mix. Take a look at Karnataka, for example. This is a state which is having an installed capacity worth 51% of renewable energies, possibly the highest in the country. And as far as generation statistics go, we are looking at close to about 36% just from renewables. So that's a very high share. At another end, we have Tata Power Delhi, which is sitting on an installed generation capacity on renewables close to about 5%, whereas the generation end is close to about 3%. So I think the whole point which I'm trying to emphasize is that we bring through today's panel a diversity of mix there. Then at the same time, the moment we talk about technology, I think we need to start looking into entrants who can bring that particular piece of technology. And this is, again, I would say Mr. Rawal is there. He represents IntelliSmart. The whole gamut of smart metering technologies, advanced metering infrastructure is something which they have been pushing over the last few years very successfully so. And it will be very interesting to know from him in terms of his plans going forward and how he sees his narrative trying to sort of build the case for our discoms in the country. Then we have Mahua, as Anshu pointed out. She is very passionately building together this piece around convergence, which basically refers to the convergence of the tariffs as well as the sweet spot of application going forward. And I would like to learn more in terms of where she sees the obstacles going forward, given the fact that all of these are very capital intensive technologies. And from where does she see that this kind of financing would be made available? I think it will also be very prudent to understand that as a panel, if we can throw some light on how do you see the discom space say, in the next, say, 4 years, 5 years, say by 2025? Because if we have to really have a pathway to be sort of chalked out, we need to have very seminal milestones, at least in the mind, if not on paper. And this is where I would say that we need to be clear in terms of how you see the pathway sort of emerging going forward. So having said that, I would like to just conclude by saying that while we are definitely going to talk about innovation, technology, and financing, the key piece to really sort of also sort of try and discover towards the discussion is that while we're definitely trying to do so, are we doing so at the cost of maybe a more existential question, which is, how do I manage my energy accounting? How do I manage my metering, billing, and collection? So I think while trying to balance, so how do I sort of push for innovation in the vast segment of discoms in the country? So with this, I will rest and maybe quickly open and see comments from maybe Mahua to begin with.
Sure, thank you, Manu, and thank you to Anshu and the CPR team. When you invited me to this, I must make a comment that I think Manu, in the time that I've known you, and you should know that I've known Manu for a long time, he doesn't pick a small topic. So I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, where do I start? Do I start at innovation? Do I start at finance? And then it says discoms. So the topic you've chosen, of course, is massive. And I think you asked, in fact, every question around it. So I'll just stick to the question that was only directed at me because it's just such a large topic. Let me tell you what some level of innovation that we're trying to do right now, that I'm trying quite hard to implement. And this idea, there's a reason why we're calling this idea of convergence. If you look, since all of you are power sector experts, if you look at some of the decentralized agriculture, all of our costs, I mean, we have Karnataka on the panel. I think we're at about 10,000 crores per year on agricultural subsidies, maybe even more. And it's been such an old topic, right? So a no-brainer appears to be to solarize it. And for years, our policies around solarizing at the feeder level or solarizing agriculture, removing those pump sets, had a bit of a stop and start, stop and go kind of approach. We now have a little bit more, a more beefed up policy around it. And why does a policy matter? Because it gives tailwind to the finance that comes in. It gives tailwind to an entity such as myself that can go back to a decent financing organization and say, I need large amounts of capital here because there is in fact a policy framework to back it. And that policy framework this time around, I feel, allows us to reduce the cost of agricultural power. And I'm kind of starting at ag because we're solarizing the very last feeder right out there with the highest losses. And while you're at it, in the time that I've seen states around the country, most of the discoms, and the discoms on this panel can refute me, have a fair bit of extra land that sort of is lying around for some years. It was scheduled for additional generation, capacity expansion, etc. But for whatever it's worth, 3 or 4 acres around many of the discom, around the substations is in fact possible. Now, if we were to say that I'd like to optimize that land, it's just lying sitting idle. And if we were to put a battery on it, and we were to take the capex of the battery and run it, let's say, for 4 or 5 hours, with that amount of charge, we'd be able to put up street lights in those villages. Now, remember, we're at the feeder level, so these are all inevitably rural. And if we were able to put up street lights with a small amount of extra panel capacity, the additional cost to the discom, when amortized on the PPA, which as a power producer, I'm already there. I'm already in the village because I've got these panels put up. They're about 1 megawatt each. That additional cost amounts to about 60 paise to 70 paise per unit for, in fact, a 25-year period. If a discom were to say, squash that down to about 10 years or 12 years, because maybe the battery needs replacement or maybe better technology will come. It's a little bit over that. Now, if you were to say, what is the benefit then on the discom part? What I'm trying to address is with this entry from this side, using the existing solar costs and optimize on that piece of land, we're now suddenly being able to reduce additional costs on the discom, not just agricultural power, but in fact what the discom would otherwise have to, or what the village or that panchayat or that area would otherwise have to pay for the purchase of power to put up the streetlights. And in many places, we don't even have those streetlights in the villages. So I'm just talking about streetlights. Now come in and say I could, in fact, since I'm operating there as a RESCO anyway, I could come in and green future demand of appliances in rural homes. So that would be, of course, a pump set. Now, even if you take the pump set at 30% efficiency, and I know BE rated efficiencies are better, but even if you take that and you don't count for that efficiency, it still pays for itself. So we've got this one project in Goa at 110 megawatts. Well, we've got about 1,500 megawatts in Maharashtra. And a new one in Goa with this kind of concept where coming in and giving the pump sets for free, because the incentive for a farmer to change a pump set is otherwise quite slim. I think we should just accept that. So if somebody were to come in and give a brand new, better pump set, this time for free, and yet it benefits the discom, plus give lights, in the case of Goa, also giving lights for free. But if Goa, in fact, needed solar cooking, if we were in Himachal Pradesh, for example, and we were having to do heating and cooking in the villages, it's given at 8-9 paise per unit. Makes no difference, incremental cost. As a financier, I have one financial instrument to deal with one counterpart. If I were to break that up, imagine having one financial instrument at 5 paise per unit over a small period of time. So I have a 250 crore contract on one, 250 crore value on one side, and then I have about 30 crore value on the other. It's very difficult to chase these things. So, and yet there's of course immense value to the DISCOM. So I think for once, after a long time, we have a policy framework in place today that allows us to get in. It has its own benefits on its own merit, and then it allows us the free will to optimize. You asked also very quickly, what kind of regulatory barriers do I foresee? Plenty. Although I don't want to sound negative as the first speaker. But I think at some level, we should try and use this idea of a sandbox. I don't know how many of you are lawyers here, but many lawyers have this idea of a regulatory sandbox, where you've got an experiment going on, like a battery that has multiple values, can produce multiple things. And we need these sandboxes because we are at a point of time in our energy transition story that unless we give ourselves this opportunity to try out things, I don't think we'd all be a little scared to discover. And that fear has several ramifications. And one big ramification is finance.
Well, that helps, Mahua. I think you have covered the entire spectrum of convergence, so to speak, right from the rural space to the urban centers. And I think the kind of capacities you're trying to install in the states of Maharashtra and Goa, that's phenomenal. I think I'll come back to this point on the sandbox, which you mentioned, because that is going to be crucial in trying to come out with a solution going forward. I'll now move on to Mr. Nayak. He brings a vast spectrum in terms of, he knows about the generation side, the transmission and the distribution side. And I just want to understand from you in terms of, you are probably the highest in terms of renewables in the country today. And while we all talk about it, that there is so-called duck curve, it's very difficult to manage at the state level, but then Karnataka is showing the way that you can do it. So from a purely, I would say, distribution perspective, can you throw some light into like, how have you done it? And in case India sort of raises its ambitions even further going forward, how would Karnataka lead the way?
Thank you, Manu, and thank you, Anshu. Thanks for the opportunity. It's very interesting time. I think the sector has always been interesting since the time I had the first interaction as a BESCOM managing director way back in 2004 and 5. So it is always interesting. The last 15, 20 years have been so. When I have come back once again here as ACS, I'm once again looking at such a fascinating scenario. BESCOM is really giving it run for the money to our generator, KPCL. I was in KPCL earlier. So now when I see from this perspective, from the government, I see two of my PSUs fighting it hard. BESCOM wants something and some direction, whereas the KPCL is with legacy issues. They are grappling with the legacy issues. I am happy to share with you that, which you yourself have shared, about 30-35% of our Karnataka share comes from renewable energy. That's a huge one, and by evening, lots of it disappears, and how do we handle that? We have been lucky. Karnataka has been extremely lucky in the sense that we do have hydro power stations plenty, Sharavati, Varahi, and Nagzari. Substantially, we have them for us to ramp up the required capacities within a short duration. But that is not enough. Now we have crossed all that. Now we seem to be raring to go further in RE. We want more investments to come in solar and things like that. The government of India is also pushing for solarization of so many feeder level solarization and pumps and things like that. So we have very clear ambitions going forward. But at the same time, we need to understand how to tackle, how to safeguard against the grid instabilities. Hydro has helped till now, but what further? I think we have a couple of pump storage plants that we have planned for. Natural one was to make use of the existing hydropower plants by setting up adjacent close by pump storage facilities. Already the DPR preparation is on, and it's about to come to a closure. That's next to Sharavati. There the plan is to go for almost 2,000 megawatts of power plant, underground power plant. We do want to make use of the existing facilities of the pondage at the top and the reservoir at the top, and then some pondage at the bottom. So whereas we just need to put up the underground power station and provide an alternate route for this water to enable us to have this kind of a pump storage facility. Another one is in the private sector, which is likely to come up in Saudati area. That is for about 1,000 megawatts or so. So combining these two, we may be looking at not less than about 3,000 to 3,500 megawatts of pump storage facility. That would take care of us, take care of the further increasing the participation of solar power in the grid. Apart from that, we would look at a number of other innovations that are happening in the distribution sector. BESCOM is always a playground for these kind of innovations. In fact, the distribution automation system was tried out in BESCOM right in 2006 or so, though the project could be completed sometime later. Now the second generation of DAS is being attempted in BESCOM, which talks about smart metering and outage management systems and JS-based consumer indexing, all these things, which will give a clear visibility to the manager, the BESCOM manager, to ensure that the outages are to the minimum and the consumer satisfaction is the maximum. So this kind of effort has to be taken up, and this is in our next set of reforms or next set of innovations or investments that we would like to do. Apart from that, gathering the data is not enough. We need to go forward for data analytics with the grid planning and peak management too. So as I just now shared, we do have the issue of so many generators today. It's not just thermal. We have thermal, hydro, RE, everybody coming in and pumping energy. And our grid management and the peak management has to be able to take into consideration all these various generators. And that will be one of our challenges, and we would like to use the technology for this purpose. Apart from that, as you know, Bangalore is a fast-growing metro, and the customer satisfaction has to be central to the success of whatever we do in BESCOM. We had taken up a lot of innovative measures in the last 8 to 10 years. Now we are looking at something called as some BOT-based centralized customer care unit. So if we can go forward and ensure that all my customers are attended to, all my crew is managed using this kind of a information system, I'll be able to maximize the satisfaction of our customers in Bangalore. Coming to, in general, what's happening in the Karnataka power scenario, the thermal generation is facing this kind of a, I would say virtually onslaught of RE, renewable energy. Then what do? Last year, if I'm correct, my statistics show me that nearly 1,200 crores of fixed charges were paid to KPCL without having consumed, without having generated any power. Similarly, the amount paid to the central government generating stations was in the order of 2,600 crores also. That's a huge amount of money being paid to thermal units for not generating. So that fixed charges are going that way. And still, we have the scope to adjust or retrofit number of these units. These are the questions which are being faced by the utilities. What do I do? As soon as this PPA is completed, should I renew that or not? What should I push the generator of the Karnataka state generator to do? So these are the things, and this is the attrition which is going on within the power department. What the KPCL would perhaps want is to have a support from the state or from the central government so that they can go and do R&M work so that they can increase their flexibility from the present position of having to say that no, their technical minimum is up to only 65 or 70. They should be able to say that I can ramp down to 40%. So that should be the kind of flexibility that the thermal stations should have so that we can go on decarbonizing or increasing the greening of our grid. So these are some of the important challenges. I'm extremely excited to hear more about her experiments in Goa. I would be keenly watching what's happening there because our state is also land-rich state. We do have enough area around the stations. I'm sure I should be able to get a few acres around each station in every part of the state. That's an interesting one. So I will come back once again. Yeah.
Sure, sir. I'll follow up with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I think you've left a very valuable point with us, and you've really focused on one aspect which probably innovation should really focus on, which is customer satisfaction. I think throughout the Westcom journey and the overall, be it the Genco side or the transmission side, what you really focused on is that customer satisfaction is the key, and that should be one of the underlying objectives of pushing for that given innovation or technology. I'll also like to sort of further build upon your experience as far as the DISCOMs are concerned. I mean, what do you think they have been doing so as to ensure that they are able to satisfy the customers as far as the diversity of customers which Karnataka has? I mean, you have the Silicon Valley of India at one end, and then you also have other, I would say, large, I would say, rural spaces. So how do you sort of manage this dichotomy as Karnataka?
Yeah, we have been trying to introduce what is known as grid feeder separation, as you are aware. So in the rural area, that has been one of our major interventions. Even here, I'm not very sure that we have reached 100%. Still, some work is still there to be done. So this has given substantial satisfaction to a large section of our consumers, that is rural-based agri consumers, where we have been able to provide electricity during the daytime. And we no longer ask them to go in the midnight and switch on their pumps and things like that. Substantially, I would say it's not fully, but substantially that has been the case. Coming to the urban area, in fact, Bangalore's experiment with loss reduction has been a journey of almost 15 to 20 years. So losses in Westcom area, that to Bangalore area, has been one of the least. And we have been pushing over a period of time to reduce the interruptions and duration of interruptions and things like that. For that, as I mentioned, we had started off with DAS at the 11 kV level, HT level, whereas now we are planning for DAS at the level of distribution voltage. So a lot of interventions like pillar boxes and smart meters, and these are being implemented now. The work is in progress. Apart from that, a large scale underground cabling has also been taken up in Bangalore. These are the things. Some of them are some of these things which are going on in Bangalore. I'm sure with this, the Bangalore customer who is very, very choosy and very, I get hundreds of thousands of calls if there is an outage of 5 minutes. That's no doubt about that. I need a bot to answer, but answering is not sufficient. We need to respond to them equally quickly. That's the reason I need to have a lot of technology to identify the fault and trigger the crew to go and attend to the faults which are there. So these are some of these interventions that we are trying out in Westcom.
That's really good to know. I think since you're talking so much about investing into technology, I think this is probably just the opportune time to call on Martin and try and understand his thoughts on financing especially in the vast, I would say, untapped discom space?
Thank you so much. I was already expecting your question. Preparing myself. Yeah. Maybe I would start with a short idea that you all get from what is KfW Development Bank working really in India at the moment. And so I would see CO2 reduction, climate change are our reasons for being in India. And when we look at our energy portfolio, we have renewable energy generation with about 2 billion euro ongoing on portfolio. And we have the huge amount, the same amount basically also to transmission and distribution, and a little small amount in terms of demand side energy and efficiency with somehow 0.7 billion of euro. And I think that is for me and for everybody also the main message. We have to look at it all. We have to see the renewable energy part. We have to see transmission and distribution. And logically, one thing that we always have to look at is this energy side, demand side energy efficiency, which is our biggest source for saving CO2 emissions. We as KfW Development Bank, we can do both. We can work, for example, with institutions like Power Finance Corporation, credit lines, which can support developers and companies in implementing their measures. And we can also do direct financing with all state distribution companies if their project qualify for the national priority. And which actually is almost everything, always the case, no? One thing is we have to, and we want to look at the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And everything that I have heard now from Mahua and from Mr. Kumar Naik is actually aiming at this main objective. And we also, that is something that I would always like to point out, we also have to think a little bit in terms of adaptation to climate change, because this is also something that will be more and more important, not only for India, but for the whole world. And when I look at the issue, for example, underground cabling is something that also addresses climate adaptation. So what I want to say is we should really look at the large picture and taking into consideration these different bits and pieces and putting it into the context. And that is and into a broader context. And that is what I also, getting back to the presentation or the intervention of Mahua, what I very much like about this convergence approach, that is really looking at the different levels and at the different parts at the same times, and that we are also able to look at different sectors and combining different sectors. And that is, I think, something that needs to be further addressed in the future. From the very, very technical point of view on the DISCOM level, I think my main message would be what gets measured gets managed. And whatever can be financed in this respect is also something that can be financed through KfW because it reduces CO2 emissions, and it contributes also to adaptation to climate change. So we are really eager to further support this sector, and we are also eager to find out together with the partners what could be innovations in the financial sector to really do this. When we look at the challenges, one of the main challenges that I, from the very bankable point of view, see is aggregation. Aggregation of demand for our finance. There's where we always have huge challenges, even when we work through financing institutions like PFC or commercial banks like SPI. The aggregation of the demand, including all these technical and organizational, political, legal points of view, is really the very tricky part of it. And there is where I would be very, very happy to see also actors, stakeholders in place who do this job and then get back to us as a financing institution to ask for financing.
Thank you, Martin. I think you have left a very interesting takeaway for Mr. Nayak. He can, with a single signature of his pen, aggregate everything in his state and come back to you.
I wish I am able to do that quickly.
I think since we are talking about investments and the kind of technologies, Mr. Nayak also spoke about digitalization. I think it's pertinent that we now invite Mr. Rawal, who is trying to do exactly that in the Indian space. Anilji?
Thanks a lot, Manu. And thank you for having me, first of all. I'll first spare a thought for the current pandemic. I really wish the people who are connected are mostly connected with essential services. I would request lots of care and wish all to stay safe. This is one of the toughest times humanity could always ever had. So coming to the topic, I think it's very, very critical topic, I would say, for the power sector as such and of the country. We have done extremely well as a country in generation and transmission. I would say there's no doubt about that. And the way we have embraced renewable has been very rightly timed and extremely well done, I would say. And I'm very sure that we'll reach all the targets which a country is thinking of on the renewable side also. And the prices, the way they have plummeted is really a pleasure, because 5 years back, around not 5, but then exactly 3.5 years back, I in one of my articles wrote that it will fall down to 50 paisa. It's still not reached there, but I would always believe that it's on the journey to that, because of the simple reason that resources which actually tap energy nearest to the natural resources are cheapest ones. It's only the transportation which causes the cost. If you can manage transportation well, you can sell as cheap as almost free, except for the fixed cost, which could be monetized over the years. So that's the thought. With that, I would believe what is still left in a large way to be managed is distribution. We have, as a country, tried a lot, various things over the years, but not with reasonable success. Still lacking seriously. We have been not thinking beyond 1,200 units of energy consumption per capita, which is really not a very pleasant thing to have. So there are two sides of stories. Renewable is to be pushed in. It will cause lots of grid imbalancing, and distribution companies have to absorb it, because that's the way forward. How do they absorb it with managing the grids? And how do they address that consumer part, which Mr. Nayak brought out, that consumers are different. They are not one mass. We've been treating consumers really as one mass, giving them what we thought to be given, really not having their say in what they want. If I, as a consumer, I see I and my forefathers have contributed a lot to the grid formation. That's been a cost-plus model. But have any of the consumer got any rights in terms of deciding what they should get and when and how and what price? Not. So that's something unfortunate. That adds one more D, 3 Ds mentioned, and that's a democratization. See, we agree decarbonization, we agree decentralization. There's lots of need, and digitalization is the way forward. I think the country has not really thought on the democratization of the power. Whether can there be a say of consumer in terms of what the consumer wants? That's a big question, which is staring on the distribution company. So at the end of the day, we come back to distribution companies that they have to buy because they are the paymasters. They have to manage because they have to address the consumer needs, and they have to balance the grid also. Can all this be done, particularly when they are financially distressed? Is a large question. So let's go a bit deeper below the surface. If they have to done, probably there are two questions they are facing. One is the network. If they really improve the network, that would lead to the pull part of the energy. Even today, I went through the NEP, the latest NEP, which has been drafted, which has been floated around. It's talking about pushing energy, right? It's talking about pull part, but not really in a focused manner. Maybe a bit more is required to be done there. If I have to give renewable energy, any energy to the consumer, it has to reach them. And pull has to come from the distribution side. That's not coming. It's not that there's no demand. I stay in Gurgaon and I pay 21 rupees per unit for the round the clock power for generator. But and I'm ready to pay more than what I normally pay to my discom. But I'm not getting the power. I'm still have at times the shutdowns. So that basically means what? Power is bottled and consumer is waiting. There's something amiss, and that amiss is network. So probably some amount of work is to be done on the network, which Government of India has very rightly identified and has given a large allocation out of the latest scheme on the revamped schemes they come out. But second part of the story is also very important. That's a metering billing collection. If I have to be financially strong and operationally strong, I have to have some money. The thought of energy not being free has to go down the consumer's brain. Even if I have to subsidize the consumer, it has to be done in an open and transparent manner through DBT kind of scheme, not by not charging, which actually is more political influence, but then ultimately economics wins over the politics across the world, across the history, across the geographies, and that here also it win. So what I'm saying is that if metering billing collection is to be handled, it will solve many of the ground problems, where the pull of the consumer would come into energy, and whole of the generation, which probably seems now bottling up, would be pulled by all the targets which we are trying to put on generation and transmission would be automatically met. So the main theme which I'm trying to bring out is that network and MBC are the two most critical part of the story, which will be handling your whole power sector story properly. Now coming to that, what we are doing as IntelliSmart is focusing on MBC part. So it's a proven fact across the world that smart metering has been of immense help in doing the financial management with the discoms. And when we try and do that in our country, the biggest problem discoms face is that they are already financially constrained. How can you ask them to move on to a new metering system, which will obviously consume lots of money? An estimate in our company shows that about 1.5 lakh crore is the country's fund requirement when it comes to transforming the conventional metering system to a digital metering system across the country. Now, if discoms have to spare that kind of money, that's something not fair. So that's where we work on the OPEX model. So OPEX model, which Government of India is also now promoting a lot, and there's a standard with document which Government of India has created, says that actually, because by doing a efficient metering, you save lots of money, and that has been proven. Because we already installed as ESL in IntelliSmart about 6.5 lakh meters in various states, and learned a lot many lessons through painful journey of really evolving this new system. But one thought has been in consensus across the utilities, and they have been saying this, that the saving which they have been getting is far more higher than the cost which they have to incur per meter per month, if you take it in the OPEX model. But you ask them to install smart meters today, they may do 50,000, 1 lakh meters, but that's not the solution. Solution actually lies in large scale transformation or transition. That transition can come through the OPEX model, which we are doing in IntelliSmart. And aim here is not to really only do meter change. What I want to leave a thought here is that meter should not be an inspector in your home. Till the time it's an inspector at your home, which actually checks how much energy you consume, it is not a welcome member. The day we start thinking beyond meter as a meter, it becomes a attraction to the consumer. And unless you pull on the metering side also, it will not be mass scale transformation. So we are doing two things. We are doing OPEX model of the smart metering so that utilities have not to pay anything. They only pay when they successfully commission the asset. right? And they start saving the money. And secondly, we are doing lots of innovation around metering, that what all can be added over the metering so that it becomes a welcome member in the home actually, so that there's a pull around it. Now coming to the second part of the story, that how metering would be a democratization, model. See, you talk about the net metering, which actually is a revenue model for the consumer that get enabled with the smart meter. You talk about the time of the day controls. You talk about the consumption appliance based. That all can be done through smart metering because of the simple reason that smart meter captures data real time and generates massive data analytics, which actually allows DISCOM not only to have real time demand supply management, but also consumer based behavior trends, understanding analysis, and sharing the offerings as per their needs. So that becomes the start of smart grid, I would say, in the country. Smart meters form the base of smart grid where we have to finally travel. If you just connect smart metering residential to the DT meters, you handle the energy accounting. If you connect the data with SCADA, you handle the complete flows and analysis. So if you do all these things, you not only achieve smart grid, responsive system, better demand supply management, but also that massive angle of financial and operational strength. I would give an example during COVID times. Not now, last phase of lockdown, we did the analysis that in all the areas where smart meters are installed, there was around 96% of bill generation, and that too actual, not the which in distribution sector you call as kind of ad hoc billing you do, that meter not read and still you pass on some of the bill because you do the averaging. Actual bill generation was done without any of the meter readers obviously traveling. And that's the power of digitalization. It actually creates the digital system which enables contactless financial and operational improvements. So these are the few things in addition to various other benefits we know, and that's what we do about smart metering in this country. One more small caution I would leave before I close. I think it's on the risk of not consuming too much of time. And caution is that the recent trends which I have been watching in the country with DISCOMs, they are conscious to smart metering. They are trying to do their bit, but in the speed of doing it, they are ending up creating small digital islands. For example, if I in a DISCOM I do 50,000 smart meter, in a other DISCOM I do 50,000, in the other DISCOM I do 1 lakh. Actually, I'm doing nothing. It's splurging of, I'm sorry to say it, not the best word to, splurging of money, because I'm doing smart metering on capex mode. I'm trying to, because benefit of digitalization is in the volume, not only in doing it. Volume seamlessly connected and integrated. When you do that, you get a treasure of data. Actually is of really immense importance for distribution companies. And that's where Government of India is now promoting this scheme, where Government of India has said that they'll contribute to the distribution sector smart metering program up to 15% of equity in case they opt for the OPEX program. Aim is not to do OPEX program, aim is to do a large scale program in the country so as to really complete this transformation which we are looking forward to. That's all from my side. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Anilji. I think that was very comprehensive, and I'm sure there will be many questions. Just to remind everyone, there are some questions. Mahua and Mr. Naik, you have received a couple. So please do take a look. I'll now sort of move to Mr. Srinivasan. In Tata Power, they have completed nearly 20 years of journey trying to do many things. And I think it's also a good time to take stock as well as also understand, how we can take this forward.
Thank you, Manu, and good afternoon to all my fellow panelists. Manu, I'll use my screen for a couple of slides if you're okay. Yeah, is my screen visible? Yeah, Manu, is my screen visible now? Yeah, okay, thank you. So just wanted to quickly capture the journey over the last 15 years or 17 years of Tata Power Delhi distribution. Of course, we started off with a loss of close to 50+% at 50.3% here. And Primarily now it has come down to about 7.3. And of course, many things have happened with the journey of 17 years. There's no silver bullet. Of course, process improvements, workforce capability improvement, technology, HR related aspects. So multiple things that have gone into achieve this kind of turnaround from 50+% to 7%. And I would say that technology has always been a very important part of the Tata Power journey. And of course, now over this time period, we have implemented several of the technologies. Of course, SCADA is probably the first ones that we implemented. We have a fully functional GIS right up to LT level. We implemented DMS, what Mr. Nayak spoke about, and are now implemented advanced ADMS, that is Advanced Distribution Management System as well. We have a fully integrated field force automation. So all the customer requests go seamlessly from the call center to the field force through electronic means. So no phone calls, no intimation required. And then the closure of the complaint also happens via the field force, by the tab that the field force has, so that the customer then gets a intimation that the complaint has been closed. So there's a closed loop. We started our AMR automatic meter reading quite early in 2006 or 7, and all the commercial and industrial customers or anybody greater than 10 kilowatt load was read through the AMR. So a lot of the reading related issues or the connivance between the meter readers, that was taken care of for the larger customers especially. And as Mr. Rawal said, smart metering has also played a very important role. We have up to about 2.3 lakh smart meters out of our total base of 18 lakh customers now. And we have a 10 megawatt battery energy storage system. And also we have a what we call as community storage, which is a storage connected to a transformer, so that in case of an outage or there is an emergency that we need to do maintenance of that transformer, we can still supply power to the customers who are connected to that transformer. So we call that community storage. So we have a megawatt scale as well as a kilowatt scale. And Delhi, of course, has announced a very aggressive EV program or electric vehicle charging program. Of course, it's yet to fully take off, but we are getting ready for the electric vehicle scale up through our own charging stations, as well as participating in the government tenders for electric vehicles. Solar, I think we are we have been adding about 15 to 20 megawatts of solar, rooftop solar every year. And of course, cumulatively, we consume about 20% of our energy comes from multiple renewable sources, wind, solar, hydro, from the grid supplies as well. So we are RPO compliant have been RPO compliant for each one of the years in the past. And we have been taking some steps as far as how do we manage the distributed energy resources. We recently started a peer-to-peer blockchain program within our customer base. Of course, it's a pilot program. So in a regulatory sandbox, as Manu and Mahua, you referred. So this is a small pilot that we are doing with our consumers, so that we can test out the value proposition of a peer-to-peer rooftop program, as well as we're working on a demand response program. Of course, one of the big challenges for us for a demand response is that
Mr. Srinivasan, your audio is not coming through. Mr. Srinivasan, are you there? Appears to be an outage at his end. So not an issue. So as they say, I mean, especially in a lockdown kind of phase, you are always in this need to sort of always make an exit and try and take a walk out and come back again. So I think Mr. Srinivasan is back.
Am I audible now?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. I think I had a little bit of a Zoom issue, but I'll just quickly come back to the slides. So where did you where did I get cut off, Manu?
I think this was slide number 5.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we've been working on a peer-to-peer program as well with our customers, and have now been working for the last actually 1 year on designing a demand response program. Because one of the challenges in demand response for us particularly is that our peak, which comes typically in July, it comes at about 11 p.m. to 12 midnight. So largely made of domestic load. So we've been trying to figure out a good program that we can roll out for peak shaving, particularly in a demand response scenario. So of course, technology has played a very critical role in the last 15 years or so. And I would say that most of the technologies that I spoke are complementary, and in a sense they are integrated. So for example, SAP is connected to GIS to ADMS, to field force automation. So in a way, the power of these technologies is once they get integrated with each other, and then we have a seamless environment by which there is easy flow of information or visibility to the power system control, to the operators on the field, etc. But one of the aspects that I wanted to particularly spend a couple of minutes on is the energy accounting aspect. And because there has been such a fundamental aspect of reaching losses of 7.3, and we have aspirations to go lower than 6.5 as well.
Can you please make your screen full screen, please?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on energy accounting. And of course, energy accounting is nothing new for everybody in the sector, but it's I think it's tougher than anticipated from the outside. It looks pretty easy that you have to basically measure the customer billing and you have to count the amount of energy that is supplied. But there are, I would say, n number of complications practically. And this is something that we have been working on and improving over the course of last 15 years. In fact, we have also been supporting the state of Uttar Pradesh in this through REC. And we're doing a project for UP Discoms. And actually, we look at it, not only energy accounting is at multiple levels. So we have it at 5 levels. Of course, the simplest one is at the transmission side, which is pretty easy because the metering infrastructure is fewer and they are pretty good, high quality or class meters. And the toughest is on the other end of the spectrum, which is at the DT level. So there is a lot of flux that happens at the DT level. Customers get shifted from one DT to the other. The DT meters get faulty, etc. So I think that this is a very important capability that apart from having technology, ability to run energy accounting on your own and making this run on a month-to-month basis. It's not a once-in-a-year affair. We have a report that gets published every month at each of these levels. What are the losses at the zonal level or a subdivision level, at the circle level, district level? So there is a lot of process and discipline that is required. So some of the foundations that I wanted to touch upon, of course, accurate customer billing, onboarding of customers. If there is improper billing that is happening, of course, you will not have a good energy accounting result. Upkeep of the metering infrastructure. This is very often neglected. The volume of meters is quite enormous, and this needs to be controlled through operational control and discipline. Of course, regular meter reading, and Mr. Rawal rightly said smart metering is definitely one of the solutions that helps in getting a regular meter read. Contract management, particularly in rural and semi-urban areas where smart metering is not involved. Accurate customer mapping. I think this is something that we, even after 15 years, there is still scope to work on in Tata Power Delhi, I would admit, is consumer mapping, because it's just so dynamic that we change the normally open points, we change the customers from one distribution transformer to the other. and regular action to correct mismatches. Sometimes we get very high or very low losses, which are indicative of some incorrect mapping. So this is a continuous activity. And once you lose track of this, then the entire energy accounting becomes literally useless. We may have all the meters, customer meters, but it becomes meaningless to use the results at the DT level or at the feeder level unless there is good customer mapping involved. And of course, most important, I would say that this is probably easier said than done, is taking action on the energy accounting inputs. Without that, all this is paperwork. So enforcement and theft booking and follow-up actions. This is something that is very, very critical, obvious, but yeah, obvious things do need to be stated though. I think I would like to spend a couple of minutes on what else is required for financial viability. This is something that we've been working on in Delhi as well. One of the things that is tariff fixation. Of course, tariff which is reflecting the cost of supply is something that is desired by all discoms, but something that is not easily achieved by most of the discoms. And here I found, at least based on my personal experience, because I have spent time in Mumbai as well, that the Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission announces tariff for 3 to 4 years at one time, and as opposed to making it an annual activity. Now, of course, it's a double-edged sword. If you get something good, you get it for 3 to 4 years. If you don't have something good, then you have to wait for 3 to 4 years. But this takes some element of political leaning out of the equation, because we are really thinking about a 3 to 4 year time frame, not here right now, this month, this quarter, or this year mindset. So I think that is something that more states or SERCs can adopt. There is a Ministry of Power guideline or a document that empowers the discoms to exit from 25-year plus thermal stations, central power stations. I think this is particularly helpful for those discoms which are having higher cost power stations, particularly high variable cost stations. I think this is something that we are pursuing and hope to save some costs from power purchase, and thereby the need for tariff increase can get reduced. Also, there is a pretty, as Mr. Rawal said, it's all about the cash box, which is the metering, billing, collection, and let me say enforcement. Longer term contracts, 5 to 7 year contracts rather than 1 or 2 year contracts will really help in terms of the business associates or the contractors putting in the infrastructure capability to last that distance, and sharing of that gains will really help. Of course, privatization is something that, as a private sector company, I would definitely say is an important aspect. But suppose privatization is not really finding favor, then many states have gone for distribution franchisee. But the contracts of distribution franchisee are largely one-sided in favor of the incumbent discom. So we have found our experience is not great as far as distribution franchisee contracts are concerned. And if there is a need, if there is an alternative for privatization, and if distribution franchisee is a serious option, then the nature of the contracts or the way in which the contracts are implemented, that needs to be reviewed, so that in the next wave, more serious private sector players can participate. And of course, one of the most important aspects, I would say, which is still not lost hope here, is the tariff policy, making it mandatory for the SERCs to have viable tariff, as well as liquidate the regulatory assets in a time-bound fashion. We have a regulatory asset of close to 6,000 crores. And even in a business as usual, it's going to take more than 10 years to liquidate that regulatory asset. So this is because of the balloon getting bigger over the last 7-8 years. And unless timely action is taken, it becomes more and more difficult for the discom to manage its liquidity. Given particularly if the government is serious about private sector participation, then the regulatory asset issue is a very, very critical one to be addressed. So those are the main points I wanted to share my perspective. Again, happy to answer any questions in the end. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. I think you've actually put down the entire piece on innovation. So I think what you're really sort of laying out there is that innovation is not about those big ticket changes. It's about those incremental, fundamental frameworks to be put in place. And over a long period of time, these are the ones which are going to yield you change. having said that, I think you also talk about enforcement being one of the key critical aspects. And since this entire piece on innovation is about also trying to ensure that things get implemented on the ground, I think now I will now invite on Mr. Kawale, who brings his vast, I would say, experiential knowledge on pushing reforms in the country. So, sir, my question to you largely is that we have heard the panelists, there is technology, there is finance. Of course, there are obstacles along the way. But I think as Mr. Srinivasan did point out that enforcement is key. So I think the key point which I would like to sort of try and draw upon your experiences, how does one build the political consensus for innovation?
Thanks, Manu. First of all, I must thank you for reconnecting me to distribution after a number of years. I've spent last 5-6 years in dirty power, that is coal-based power, and been out of distribution for almost 8 to 10 years. My mind goes back to my power ministry days when we were drafting the RAPDRP. And one of the main differences between APDRP and RAPDRP was this, the technological input that we wanted to incorporate into the program. In fact, we were able to convince the finance ministry as well as the planning commission, as it then was, that this technological input should be on a basis of 100% subsidy from Government of India. So what we had in mind was a IT-enabled automated energy accounting system along with an advanced metering infrastructure, which would form the basis of all these innovations. And you can build on various things on top of this base to for instance, integration of renewables, decentralization, all the Ds that we talked about initially, decentralization of your management into the circle level and even down, digitalization, and also better consumer service. All that was the the grand plan, the grand strategy, which actually never comes down to practice. And in retrospect, what I find is that although this 100% subsidy from Government of India was there, not many distribution utilities actually took advantage of this in a planned manner. There may have been, and Mr. Rawal is perfectly right. It doesn't make sense, if you have 30 circles, it doesn't make sense to do this in 4 circles and hope that in course of time, this will spread to the other areas and your distribution utility will be better. It has, unless it is done all together throughout the enterprise, whether it's a small DISCOM or a big DISCOM, you will not reap the real benefits. And that is perhaps what I feel was the failing of this RAPDRP, that it got implemented in a piecemeal manner. Of course, it is very impressive what Tata Power has done. And it becomes, the contrast between a government-owned distribution utility and a private one like Tata Power becomes very apparent, because through the presentation, you can clearly see that they had a roadmap worked out and they worked on it for more than 10 years. That consistency and that continuity is something that is not given to distribution companies owned by government, because you have very fast turnover, the MDs change, the ministers change, secretaries change, priorities change, and you end up in a lot of confusion. So I'm very happy that Tata Power is hand-holding UP distribution companies to implement what they have implemented. As he said, Mr. Srinivasan said, it's not at all easy. And I have gone through that painful experience. The simple exercise of consumer mapping, you can start tearing your hair out because you never seem to be able to get it. So particularly in a government-owned utility, you spend a couple of years trying to do your consumer mapping, you go away, the new fellow comes and he's trying to learn what this whole animal of a distribution company is, and he has to restart again. So somehow we have to break out of that and have an institutional mechanism like this hand-holding. I really like this concept that a private utility is hand-holding a government utility for a program which takes a lot of patience, a lot of planning, and a lot of continuity. I'm really excited with this idea. And if we have success on these lines, I think this needs to be replicated. Days are over where you have a pilot project here and a pilot project there, and then you hope that whatever works, you will replicate all across the country, all across the state. What has already worked is in front of us. Tata Power has done it, and so have the other private utilities. It's not as if Tata Power is the only one, but I am also more familiar with what they have been doing. As JS also, I have visited their facilities and tried to understand what they were doing with technology. So we have a model. It only needs to be replicated across the utilities one by one and not in a piecemeal manner. I think, at least from my side, this is a learning that I have drawn from this interaction, although I've been away from distribution for a long time now, and hoping that we will see the results of what we at that time thought that we were trying to, bring in a revolution in distribution companies through this 100% subsidy of technological input. I hope it happens very soon. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that aspect of consistency also. I think with this, I will now open the panel floor for questions. I know we had time till 4:30. We are almost touching that, but if you are okay with it, can we extend by like 10 to 15 minutes for taking on these questions, if that's okay with the panel? I will immediately begin with any questions for Mr. Srinivasan, if at all there are any, at least in the chat box, I don't see.
My presentation was so clear that it doesn't need any questions probably.
It was very clear.
Yes, that's the beauty of clear presentations. In fact, as I have pointed out, you have actually handed us a roadmap to follow.
We have been in discussion with MOP, with JS, as well as multiple stakeholders in MOP. So yeah, we have even with CMD REC, we have been in discussion. So yes, we've been sharing our lessons, and as Mr. Kavle said, so have other private companies like Torrent and many others. We are sharing our learning so that it can get used both for ourselves as well. We have taken over discoms in Orissa now, so it's a very different cup of tea as compared to Delhi or Mumbai or Ajmer, where we are used to a much smaller 500 square kilometer type of area. Here, every subdivision is more than 500 square kilometers, so it's much more challenging, and the sparsity or the density of customers is so limited that it's a different game there.
Thank you so much for that.
Manu, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Manu, if you allow me, I will log off since I have another engagement. If you allow me, please.
But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Manu. Thank you to my fellow panelists as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Mr. Naik, there are a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, Manu, I will take one of them.
Yes.
Mr. Ishan Bhand, he is asking, Indian utilities have been resistant to changes, and that could be a reason for their poor financials. How would you suggest to existing DISCOM management to start creating innovative solutions to address the changes in power sector and reimagine their business model? What kind of nudges would be necessary at each level, and after what period the changes would be visible? Question is comprehensive. I don't think my answer would be that comprehensive, but definitely I would attempt that to answer that. To say that they are resistant to change may not be totally correct. The Indian utilities, by and large, have been owned by the public sector, as now one of the co-panelists, Mr. Kavle, had put across. that unless there is some kind of a threat in quotes, nobody would take it seriously. So if there is a threat to private sector, that there is an emerging private entity which can give a run for its money, that will be the best kind of a motivation. Rest of it will more or less fall in place. That is my fundamental belief. If you look at the various initiatives that the utilities like BESCOM have done over a period of time, not now, the element of consistency, element of continuity might be missing because of the factors just now mentioned. But there are innovations, there are technological interventions which have been tried out to a great extent and with a lot of success. In fact, if you recollect the kind of below 10% loss in the urban area, we had achieved quite some time back. I'm not talking about 5-10 years. It's almost in 2005-06 itself. We had registered a good part of the city registering less than 10% distribution losses. That is huge. That is coming from a public sector-owned company. Interesting challenges have been coming in the way of ESCOMs, like the attraction of RE power, which is low cost and which is green and which is very good. Whereas the other side, we have a regular PSU like state generators, which seem to be high cost and not so agile and things like that. So this is where the ESCOMs are now innovating and trying to find out how to push their brothers in the government to become more and more efficient. I can see it here in Karnataka happening. That is one way. Another thing is how to realize their own ambitions of having more RE and low cost power. That is also pushing the ESCOMs to try and innovate models which are capable of getting implemented. So this is also happening right now, and there will not be one single answer to that. But a number of programs like Kusum and things like that, they are in a way empowering the DISCOMs to innovate like this and to reimagine the business models. Yeah, this is what I felt is a good question and a reasonable answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, Anil ji, there have been quite a number of questions addressed to you, but just to summarize some of them, I think what they're really focusing and trying to understand is how data analytics can be the way forward. So can you throw some light on that?
Thanks a lot. So a very valid question. When we do digitalization of such mass scale meters and the consumers, the prime thing we get is data. And that has first usage as the data of consumption, which any grid would need to be responsive. And when we talk about smart grid, the basic minimal definition of smart grid is responsive grid to demand and supply. So today we have all the data from supply side, as was rightly mentioned. The transmission side, we have lots of metering. Up to DT level also at this is where the metering, but we don't have the demand side data at all. So that's the first benefit is the distribution component. Today we are talking about the battery being used for the purpose of management of the demand and the variation of the managing the variability in the grid. This battery has a cost. Let me tell you, this cost could be easily removed if you have the right data coming every 15 minutes from the consumer side. That's the first and foremost benefit of data, which actually the DISCOM captures. Now coming to the next, we have done a reasonably large pilot with about 8,000 consumers, anonymous consumer taken. And we have carried out what kind of analytics it can throw. We ran a pilot. Actually, 5 use cases came out very, very clearly and glaringly. First was the theft. In data analytics, you can easily capture the theft. Any consumer doing the theft can be captured through data analytics easily. There will be always outliers in the consumption patterns, which can be easily picked up. Second is the most prevalent thing which happens in our country is agriculture feeders consuming industrial power in the small industry in the agriculture meter, because they are subsidized, and you put some small industry there. This can be easily captured through the data analytics by the consumption patterns. First, third, you having a small industrial office in the home, which is again very prevalent. It can be easily captured through data analytics. So I'm just telling the basic layman use cases which we went through. Similarly, a house using small industry. So these are the few cases which can be easily captured through data analytics. And in addition to that, what data analytics can throw as my consumption pattern to distribution company, and distribution company can easily do the time of the day. Today, we have the name of the time of day, which we all are aware and we talk a lot, but we have not been able to translate to the consumer benefit. Actually, there was a question in this list, what I get as a consumer. This you get. One, you get your control on your consumption. If you have the prepaid metering, you can manage your consumption and charge it accordingly. If my meter can start showing the appliance-based signature, which is very much possible, you can actually know what appliance is consuming how much and which with the time, what's the time to change the appliance. In addition to that, data analytics would throw the time of the day, which can translate into actual financial benefits to the consumer also. There are many things. Frankly, this is the area which is not being stressed. There's a lot to go on this.
I think this is you're absolutely right when you mentioned that. And I think this is the time I must invite Mahua for her comments on some of the questions there. But in particular, the one I'm actually wanting to come back to is on how do you activate convergence through financing models or any new upcoming business models?
Thanks, Manu. There was also one more question that I didn't do justice to. So let me just, maybe it's also related. It was to Mahesh's question on how do you bring money into sandboxes? Well, let me explain where I think we need a regulatory sandbox. And what do I mean by a sandbox is, there is an experimentation hub. It's a certain experimenting project that is, of course, it's a pilot, but it's a decent size pilot. Pilots don't have to be small and they have to have real money. It has to work on commercial terms. In the business of battery storage today, it's still very expensive. But if you were to use that battery to charge your car and of course service the grid, we've just commissioned a study and it's in its final stages. And it's in fact in the Delhi area, that if you were to use an electric charging station and make it battery based and locate that charging station and the battery close to a substation, you can perhaps a substation where the transformers are overloaded. You could even use, and for which there is regulation in the demand side management regulations, that allows you to defer the CapEx costs for the DISCOM using the additional battery storage that I've put on there at that site. It's small, yes, but we have plenty of such situations that could do with smallish size batteries. It's not very small, it's about 4 to 5 megawatt because it's in the Delhi area. But where do we need a sandbox? Now, we don't have a regulation right now. The last time the DSM regulations were perhaps used is a long time ago. When we think of policies, we think of them in large scale silos. In the electric mobility sector, we say, oh, electric batteries are very expensive. And so all of the costs to do with the battery. In the power sector, we say we need it for stability and other such services. But you know, the two in fact do meet. When we combine them in the feasibility study, we found that in fact, the revenue need coming out of that on a per unit basis, although they're not providing per unit kind of service because we don't have an instrument outside of a PPA, on a per unit basis is 1 rupee cheaper than what the Delhi area currently pays for purchasing power. No subsidy needed. So the idea of convergence again is, I'm just trying to bring these two things together. And if we were in fact allowed to do that in a proper regulatory manner, this is one area that could open up. And there are several such areas, but this is a decent sized potential for opening up, and for which we need capital is not the problem for this kind of stuff. We have to allow ourselves this kind of experimenting. There was another question around how do you bring money? I would actually nowadays put my bet on guarantees. It's an old instrument. Many private companies are willing to pay the additional guarantee fee. And I find that private investors, private or any kind of commercial investors, they don't have to be private, you know, the old question of will the discom pay me or will they not pay me? And because of so many years of not having gotten paid from discoms, that even if you have a good paying discom, we have Bescom here, we have dealing with Maharashtra. So plenty of these commercial investors say that I'm willing to spend the additional 1.5 to 2% of a guarantee fee and just allow me to do it for the first 2 years. That builds, or 2 to 3 years, that builds credibility of repayment. You know, it's an old instrument, and public sector financiers understand guarantees. I used to be at the World Bank. We have Martin here. You know, guarantees are an old infrastructure tool. And it would be great if we could have commercial guarantees, not always just done by the World Banks and other paralegal institutions. So if I were to choose, since there are a plethora of financial instruments out there, I think this would go a very long way. If there was a shelf of guarantees that, you know, that I could buy from, and in fact, the market for guarantees is massive. The demand for guarantees is massive. The need for guarantees is also massive.
Thanks, Mahua. I think I would actually want a reaction from Martin on this. I think, what is your thought? You talked about aggregation, and now Mahua is talking about this aggregated portfolio menu of guarantees, so to speak.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think this was really good preparation for my thoughts as well. That's exactly what I was thinking. If we could develop something in this respect together, I would be very happy. Still, we need to look together in all the small nitty-gritty details when it comes to play together in this sandbox. Now, in order to really sort out what do the different stakeholders need in order to make all these guarantee schemes work. And again, for me, I have looked at many of these proposals I've taken over only recently my job, and I have looked at many of these proposals that come to my desk, and in almost all the cases, I have this problem: where is the scale, and where is the aggregation, and how can we make this happen? No, we need to somehow standardize products. We need to have commoditize it. We have to have very clear what are we going to finance, what are we going to guarantee, what are really the assets behind it, and what are the schemes, how we are going to measure this. So I am really prepared to do this. Mahua, you know that I'm very open to discuss these different options. But again, we as a bank, we need to think a little bigger in order to make all this really happen in terms of transaction costs. No, but we are there to support whoever is interested in this.
Perfect, Martin. I think that is the encouraging statement we are all looking for. I think I'll leave the last final word with Mr. Kawale. What are your thoughts?
I don't think I have any last final word, but it's been very exciting to take part in this discussion. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you so much. Mr. Nayak, any lasting thoughts or final thoughts from your end?
Not really. Please keep doing this often. So it'll be there.
Perfect.
It's interesting and nice to hear so many knowledgeable people here. Yeah.
Well, I think Karnataka is showing the way. And as Tata Power also mentioned, they are also not very far behind.
We are competing, no problem.
Yeah, competition is always welcome if it leads to scale, as Mr. Kawale mentioned. So I think with this, we are over 15 minutes over time, but I guess it was a time well spent, according to me. Anyways, just to summarize some thoughts, which I think the panelists threw up very interesting ideas. We had thoughts around the regulatory barriers, how do you sort of overcome them? So the concept of sandbox came up. Then I think in terms of financing, Martin did mention on the aggregation, especially maybe at the state level, but also the thoughts on aggregation of instruments like guarantees, which is kind of old fashioned and yet very, very effective in the Indian context. going forward, I think one of the thoughts which Mr. Rawal very nicely brought about is the need to go in for scale, if not for anything else, but for the network effect. I think that is something which is the sticky point, which you really left with us. And of course, Mr. Srinivasan did point out that whatever else, do not let go of the fundamentals. That is the mainstay. I think with this, I will probably sort of give a virtual applause to the panelists for the job well done in pointing out these various issues. And thank you so much. We had at one point in time, and in fact, for the majority part, close to about 80, 85 participants. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we do look forward to inviting you over for the next set of energy transition dialogues. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.